They handed him a mission that was supposed to take 72 hours. They gave him a team of the best soldiers America ever produced. They gave him coordinates, a target, and a timeline. What they never gave him was the truth. Because the truth would have revealed that the moment Marcus Hale and his team crossed that border, they were already dead men walking. Someone in the highest levels of power had already signed their death certificates. The only question was whether Marcus would figure it out before the clock ran out. If you love your mom and dad, hit that subscribe button right now and show them some love. They raised someone with incredible taste. The black envelope arrived at exactly 3:14 in the morning. No return address. No official military seal. Just a matte black rectangle sitting on the desk inside Marcus Hale's private quarters at Fort Bragg. As if it had materialized out of thin air. Marcus had been awake, as he always was at that hour, doing push-ups in the dark because sleep had become a stranger to him years ago. He stared at the envelope for a long moment before picking it up. 17 years in Special Forces had trained him to recognize when something felt wrong. And this felt very, very wrong. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. A printed satellite image of a compound deep in the mountains of Eastern Europe, specifically in a remote region of Moldova near the Ukrainian border. Below the photograph was a handwritten note with just 2 lines. 6 operatives. 72 hours. A phone number followed. Nothing else. Marcus should have thrown it away. Every instinct he had built over nearly 2 decades of black operations, hostage rescues, and counterterrorism missions told him to drop the envelope, report it through proper channels, and walk away. But Marcus Hale had never walked away from anything in his life. It was both his greatest strength and, as he would soon discover, the very flaw that someone powerful had carefully calculated and exploited. He made the call at 3:30 in the morning. The voice on the other end was calm, authoritative, and immediately familiar. It belonged to General Raymond Colton, a 3-star general Marcus had served under during 2 deployments in Afghanistan. A man Marcus trusted completely. A man Marcus would have taken a bullet for without a second thought. Colton explained the mission in broad strokes. A rogue weapons scientist named Dr. Anton Voss had stolen a prototype bioweapon from a NATO research facility 6 weeks prior. The weapon, codenamed LAZARUS, was a genetically engineered pathogen capable of targeting specific ethnic populations based on DNA markers. In the wrong hands, it was not just a weapon of war. It was a weapon of extinction. Voss had reportedly sold the prototype to a private military contractor operating out of a fortified compound in the Moldovan mountains, a compound that officially did not exist on any government map. The mission was to infiltrate the compound, locate and secure LAZARUS before it could be replicated or deployed, neutralize all hostiles, and extract with zero trace. No air support. No backup. No communication with command once the team crossed the border. Total blackout. Total deniability. The kind of mission that, if it went sideways, the United States government would look every journalist and foreign diplomat in the eye and say it never happened. Marcus agreed before Colton finished speaking. He was given 48 hours to assemble his team. He chose 5 people he had fought beside and bled beside across multiple continents. First was Sergeant Diana Reyes, a former Marine raider with 3 combat tours and a reputation for being the deadliest sniper on the eastern seaboard. She was calm under pressure in a way that made other soldiers nervous because it seemed inhuman. Second was Lieutenant James "Ghost" Whitmore, a former Delta Force demolitions expert who had once disarmed a bomb using nothing but a Swiss Army knife and 20 seconds of pure nerve. Third was Corporal Deon Banks, the youngest of the group at 26, a signals intelligence specialist who could hack into any communication system on Earth given 15 minutes and a decent Wi-Fi signal. Fourth was Sergeant First Class Pavel Orin, a naturalized American citizen originally from Ukraine, whose knowledge of Eastern European geography, language, and culture was worth more than any map or briefing document. Fifth and finally was Captain Lydia Chen, a field surgeon and combat operative who had kept 3 men alive in the middle of the Kandahar desert with a field kit and nothing but focus. Together they were not just soldiers. They were ghosts. Professionals so skilled and so experienced that they operated in the spaces between visibility and shadow. They met in a classified briefing room at an undisclosed location in Virginia 2 days after Marcus made the call. The room was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of old coffee and industrial cleaning solution. General Colton was not there in person. His face appeared on an encrypted video feed. pixelated slightly but his voice coming through crisp and clear. He walked them through the mission details with the precision of a man who had done this 100 times. Satellite imagery, guard rotation schedules, entry points, the location of the laboratory within the compound where LAZARUS was believed to be stored. Everything was laid out with meticulous clarity. The intelligence looked solid. The plan looked clean. The risk assessment listed casualties as unlikely. Marcus studied every image, every diagram, every line of data. He asked sharp questions. Colton answered each one smoothly. At no point did anything appear out of place. At no point did the intelligence show what was actually waiting for them on the other side of that border. At no point did anyone in that room, not Marcus, not Diana, not Ghost, not any of them, realize that every single piece of information they were being given had been carefully, surgically, deliberately constructed to be just convincing enough to walk 6 of America's finest soldiers into a trap they would not walk out of. They crossed the Moldovan border at 0200 hours on a Tuesday, 3 nights after the briefing. They came in low via a modified civilian helicopter with no military markings, dropping into a dense forest roughly 11 kilometers from the compound. The night was cold and moonless, the sky a thick canvas of clouds that swallowed any ambient light. They moved in absolute silence through the forest, Pavel leading the way with a familiarity born from a lifetime of these landscapes. The air smelled of pine and frozen earth and something else, something faintly chemical that no one mentioned but everyone noticed. The first 4 hours were textbook. They covered the terrain quickly, set up an observation position on a ridgeline overlooking the compound, and spent 90 minutes confirming guard positions and patrol patterns. From a distance, the compound matched the satellite imagery almost exactly. A central concrete structure, a perimeter fence with watchtowers, floodlights that swept in predictable intervals. Deon counted the visible guards and came up with a number that matched the intelligence briefing precisely. 22 hostiles. Manageable. Exactly as expected. Ghost looked through his scope and said quietly, with the particular flatness of someone choosing their words carefully, that something felt off. Marcus asked him what specifically. Ghost was quiet for a long moment and then said he could not identify it. Just a feeling. Marcus filed it away and gave the order to move in. They breached the perimeter at 0415 hours through a drainage culvert running beneath the eastern fence line, exactly as the briefing had outlined. Deon disabled the motion sensors along that corridor with almost contemptuous ease. They moved through the outer yard in pairs, using the building shadows for cover, communicating only through hand signals. They reached the central structure without a single alarm being triggered. The inside of the building was dark and industrial, all exposed concrete and harsh fluorescent lighting. Pavel led them down a service corridor toward the sublevel laboratory according to the blueprint they had memorized. They encountered 2 guards on the way down and neutralized both of them with silent efficiency. Everything was going exactly according to plan. That was the first sign that something was deeply, catastrophically wrong, though none of them understood it yet. The laboratory was on sublevel 2, behind a reinforced steel door with a biometric lock. Deon cracked it in under 8 minutes. When they stepped inside, the room was empty. Not empty as in cleared out hastily. Empty as in never occupied. The benches were clean. The equipment was there but dormant, as if it had been placed as a prop rather than used for actual research. There was no LAZARUS. There was no Dr. Anton Voss. There were no signs that the weapon had ever been in this building at all. Marcus stood in the center of that empty laboratory for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then his earpiece crackled, and Ghost's voice came through with a single word spoken in the tightly controlled tone of a man suppressing panic. Contact. What happened next came fast. The compound that intelligence had told them housed 22 guards actually housed 214. They had been waiting. Not patrolling, not guarding. Waiting specifically for Marcus and his team, positioned in predetermined kill zones throughout the building and the yard. The guard rotation they had observed from the ridgeline had been a performance, a choreographed display of normalcy designed to confirm the false intelligence and get the team to move inside. The next 6 hours were the most violent and desperate of Marcus Hale's life, and he had lived a life full of violence and desperation. They fought their way through 3 floors of the building, losing their extraction route within the first 20 minutes when a controlled explosion sealed the corridor they had entered through. Marcus made the call to go up instead of out, using the building's upper levels to gain tactical advantage and buy time. Ghost was hit on the second floor. A clean shot through the shoulder that dropped him but did not stop him. He kept moving, kept fighting, kept placing charges on every structural weak point he could find with his one functional arm because that was who Ghost was. Deon was the first they lost. He was covering their rear on the third-floor landing when 4 hostiles came up a stairwell he had not known existed because it was not on the building blueprint they had been given. He took 2 shots to the chest and 1 to the neck. He was gone before Marcus could reach him. Marcus held him for 2 seconds, exactly 2 seconds, then stood up and kept moving because that was all the time the mission allowed, and Deon, of all people, would have understood that. Pavel was the second. He was hit by shrapnel from a grenade on the roof during their brief push to gain high ground. He survived the initial blast, but the internal bleeding was beyond what Lydia could stabilize in the field without proper equipment. He lasted 40 minutes, long enough to help them identify a secondary exit route he recognized from the geography of a building style common in Soviet-era construction. He told them where to go with his last coherent words, and then he was still. Marcus, Diana, Ghost, and Lydia regrouped in a mechanical room on the building's top floor and took stock. 3 teams of hostile forces were now converging on their position from below. They had ammunition for perhaps 40 minutes of sustained engagement. No extraction. No backup. No communication with command because the blackout protocol meant no one was coming and no one was looking. It was in that mechanical room, crouched behind industrial boiler units while bullets tore through the walls around them, that Marcus finally understood. Not suspected. Not theorized. Understood with the cold absolute clarity of a man who has been shown the truth by the evidence of his own eyes. This was not a failed mission. This was not a compromised operation. This was an execution. They had been sent here to die. Every detail, the false intelligence, the deliberate underreporting of hostile forces, the building blueprint with the missing stairwell, the non-existent Lazarus, all of it had been engineered with one purpose: to place 6 specific people in a location from which they would not return. The question that ignited something ice-cold and furious in Marcus's chest was not how. The question was why. What had 6 soldiers uncovered, witnessed, or become that made them worth this level of orchestrated elimination? He turned to Diana, who was reloading with the practiced calm that had always made her seem more machine than human. He asked her if she remembered the mission in Serbia 8 months ago. The one that had been classified above their clearance level before they were even fully debriefed. She looked at him for a long moment and he saw in her eyes that she remembered. He asked her if she remembered what they had found in that farmhouse outside Belgrade that was never included in any official report. She said she remembered every detail. Then he asked her if she had ever wondered why they had been told to forget it. She did not answer because she did not need to. The answer was in this room with them, dressed in 214 sets of hostile body armor, and converging from 3 directions. What Marcus did next was not in any military manual. It was not the product of training or protocol or any doctrine of warfare he had ever been taught. It was the product of 17 years of experience, rage at a magnitude he had never before allowed himself to feel, and a decision that crystallized in his mind with perfect simplicity. He was not going to run. He was not going to extract. He was going to go back down into that compound, and he was going to find whatever file, whatever server, whatever physical evidence existed that explained why 6 soldiers had to die to protect a secret that men in suits and offices in clean, safe buildings needed to keep buried. He told Ghost and Lydia to create a diversion from the roof. He told Diana to cover him from a position she could hold for 15 minutes. Then he went back down. What Marcus found in the sublevel administrative office of that compound was not Lazarus. Lazarus had never existed. What he found was a series of encrypted hard drives and a single physical ledger that, even with his limited ability to read the coded entries in the field, contained enough names, dates, transaction records, and operational directives to detonate a political explosion that would reach from the mountains of Moldova all the way to the marble corridors of Washington, D.C. He recognized several of the names. One of them was General Raymond Colton. He took everything. Every drive. The ledger. A secondary file folder that had been locked in a biometric safe. He forced open with a method Ghost had taught him years ago over bad coffee and a bet. He stuffed it all into a waterproof tactical bag, fought his way back up through 2 floors of hostile engagement that caused him a deep laceration across his left side and 2 fingers on his right hand, and reached Diana's position with 45 seconds to spare before her ammunition ran out. The 4 of them extracted through a route Pavel had identified, a route that required crossing 200 meters of open ground under fire, scaling a 12-foot perimeter wall, and running 3 kilometers through dense forest with hostiles pursuing on foot in 1 vehicle. Ghost collapsed twice and got up both times. Lydia worked on Marcus's side wound while they ran, which was something that under any other circumstances would have been an absurd thing to attempt, and which she executed with the quiet competence that had always made her remarkable. They reached the extraction border crossing at dawn. There was no helicopter waiting. There had never been a helicopter scheduled for extraction because the people who sent them had never intended them to require one. They crossed on foot into a neighboring jurisdiction, used a contingency protocol Marcus had established independently of the official mission parameters, because 17 years of black operations had taught him that contingency protocols established independently were sometimes the only ones that kept you alive, and made contact with a private network of former intelligence personnel, who operated outside of official channels, and who owed Marcus Hale more than he had ever collected on. 48 hours later, Marcus was in a safe house in a city he will not name, with Diana and Lydia and a barely conscious Ghost who was finally receiving proper medical attention, and a tactical bag full of evidence that represented a career-ending, freedom-ending, possibly life-ending threat to some of the most protected people on Earth. The mission debrief that General Colton had scheduled never took place, because General Colton received a phone call 40 hours after the compound operation that made his blood run cold. The call was from a number he did not recognize. The voice on the other end was Marcus Hale. Marcus said 4 words. He said he had the ledger. Then he said 9 more. He said that copies already existed in 12 separate locations. Then he hung up. In the weeks that followed, 3 things happened in quiet succession that never made the news but that sent tremors through certain classified corridors of power. A congressional aide with deep ties to defense contracting submitted an unexpected resignation. A NATO intelligence liaison requested emergency reassignment to a non-operational desk position. And General Raymond Colton, 3-star general, decorated veteran, and the man who had signed the death certificates of 6 soldiers without ever leaving his office, was found the following morning having suffered what official reports described as a sudden cardiac event. Marcus Hale read the obituary in a diner somewhere in the American Midwest, eating eggs and black coffee, Diana sitting across from him reading the same article on her phone. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Outside the window, an ordinary Tuesday morning was happening in an ordinary American town, people driving to work and walking dogs and buying groceries, all of it unaware of the machinery that sometimes turned beneath the surface of the world they lived in. Diana finally put her phone down and asked Marcus what came next. He finished his coffee. He thought about Deon, 26 years old and the best signals man he had ever worked with. He thought about Pavel, who had used his last coherent words to save the people around him. He thought about Ghost, who was currently recovering in a safe location, and had already sent a message saying he was ready to move when Marcus was. He thought about Lydia, who had saved 3 lives on one terrible night and asked for nothing in return except the truth about why it had happened. He thought about 12 encrypted drives sitting in 12 separate locations known only to him. He put his coffee cup down, looked at Diana, and said that what came next was whatever they decided to make of it. Because for the first time in 17 years, they were not operating under orders. They were not serving a chain of command. They were not instruments of a system that had just tried to destroy them. They were 4 people with the most dangerous information on Earth and nothing left to lose, and the particular freedom that comes to a person when the worst thing that could happen to them already has. Diana looked at him for a long moment and then, for the first time in as long as Marcus could remember, she smiled. Outside, the ordinary Tuesday continued. Inside, something new had just begun. If you love your mom and dad, hit that subscribe button right now, show them some love, because they raised someone with seriously incredible taste in content. And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us, what part of the country are you watching from today? Let us know where you are representing from right now.